الرؤساء كذلك يؤيدون فكرة المؤتمر
أن يعود حزب الله إلى لبنان.
Good afternoon on this Sunday, November 3rd. I'm Yumna Naufal, and these are today's headlines. The army arrests 3 Lebanese and 1 Syrian over their involvement in an attack on a bus carrying Alawite residents in Tripoli. Future MP Nuhad Mashnout reiterates that Hezbollah's withdrawal from Syria and the Babda Declaration would be the basis of any future partnership between the party and the resistance. And U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry says his country is committed to working with Egypt's interim rulers on his first visit to Cairo since the military ousted President Mohamed Morsi. The army has arrested 3 Lebanese and 1 Syrian over their involvement in an attack on a bus carrying Alawite residents in Tripoli, raising fears of renewed deadly clashes in the city. Head of the Future Bloc MP, Fuad Senura, condemned the incident on behalf of his party, saying that the perpetrators should be tried. The Army's General Directorate said on Saturday night that the military apprehended 3 Lebanese identified as Khalid Jamal al-Rai, Omar Mohammed Abdel Aziz al-Ahmad, Mustafa Abdel Hamid Jawhar, and Syrian national Yahya Samir Mohammed for their role in the attack. The suspects took part in beating and wounding 6 Alawites from the Jabal al-Muhsin neighborhood who were commuting on a public bus through the Sunni neighborhood of Bib al-Tabani on Saturday afternoon. Future MP Nuhad Mashnout is reiterating that Hezbollah's withdrawal from Syria and the Babda Declaration would be the only basis of any future partnership between the party and the resistance. Mashnout's remarks are in reference to Hezbollah chief Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah's call for the Future Movement and the March 14 coalition to accept a new cabinet lineup that would give rival groups veto power and end the political paralysis. The MP also fired back at Nasrallah, who said earlier this week that developments in Syria are tipping the balance, both politically and on the battleground, in favor of the Syrian regime. Whoever holds the victory sign at the expense of hundreds of thousands of innocent people and detainees will never know victory and will never be an ally of the free people, Mashnout said. He also accused Iran of fighting with the blood of the Lebanese and Syrians to impose its hegemony on Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Yemen, and Bahrain. Maronite Patriarch Bashar al-Ra'i says that Lebanon's Christians should not be bystanders in the sectarian war. Rather, they should make an initiative to resolve it. The Christians cannot and do not have the right to be bystanders in the ongoing political confessional conflict, al-Ra'i said in his weekly sermon during Mass in Kirki. On the contrary, he added, they should initiate to resolve the conflict by finding ways to form a new government and reaching an agreement on a new electoral draft law that is fair to all of the country's factions. He also said that they should also work for holding the parliamentary elections as soon as possible and do all they can to elect a new president next year. The Patriarch rejected turning Lebanon into a commodity in the hands of local and foreign parties. He also refused to make a country a captive in the hands of warring parties. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is in Cairo on his first visit to Egypt since the army overthrew President Mohamed Morsi back in July. His visit comes at a time of strained relations between the traditional allies after Washington suspended some military aid to Egypt following Morsi's ouster. The United States said on October 9th it would withhold deliveries of tanks, fighter aircraft, helicopters, and missiles, as well as $260 million in cash aid to Egypt, pending progress on democracy and human rights. Kerry, who embarks on a Middle East tour lasting up to November 11th, said this week he would visit Cairo to meet a cross-section of civil society.
The United States is a friend of the people of Egypt, of the country of Egypt, and we are a partner to your country. It plays a crucial role in the political, the cultural, and the economic leadership of the Middle East and of North Africa. What happens here is profoundly important to the region, and it is in the interest of the United States. This has been a difficult time, and these have been a turbulent couple of years. Have shown the world how strong they are. They have really demonstrated a significant resolve as they work to see their transition, to meet their aspirations as they've tried to make that work. And President Obama is completely committed to the idea that the path forward is ultimately in the hands of the Egyptian people, and we are confident that they will overcome the challenges that are facing them. President Obama has said we are committed to work with, and we will continue our cooperation with the interim government.
وكما قال الرئيس أوباما نحن ملتزمون وسنستمر في تعاوننا مع الحكومة المؤقتة.
We have much to work on, and the minister and I this morning discussed very candidly the issues and the challenges that we face together. But we think there is agreement on many of these things, even as we need to keep faith with the roadmap and the path ahead to continue the march to democracy.
Egypt's Foreign Minister Nabil Fahmy says that Egypt would look beyond the U.S. to meet its security needs and warns Washington that it could no longer ignore popular demands in a changed Arab world. Fahmy said the United States must take a long-term view of its relations with Egypt and understand that in the wake of the Arab Spring, it would have to contend with the population in the Arab world and not just their governments.
The message that I'm going to convey is that this, and the President is going to convey also when he sees him, is that this is a very important relationship, the U.S.-Egypt relationship, that this is a new Egypt also, that the relationship is much deeper than aid or no aid, and it has to be looked at as a strategic relationship rather than a tactical one. We will work in that constructive fashion to develop the relationship, but there's no question in our mind that we will fulfill our national security needs as they are required from whatever source we need. There's a strong foundation, but we have a problem. There is, at this turbulent period, a lot of questions about what we do next. For me, it goes far beyond the aid package, but as somebody trying to promote Egypt's interests internationally, I factor in the American relationship quite strongly. And that's the approach we will take. This is going to be a frank, honest dialogue between friends. The principle that the military assistance is not consistent as programmed raises concerns for us, because this is not a program that can be shifted short term, nor are you
Human Rights Watch accuses Egypt's military-installed authorities of failing to investigate the killing of protesters by the security forces, mainly on October 6th when deadly clashes rocked Cairo. The New York-based group on Saturday charged at 3 weeks since police used lethal force to break up protests of supporters of President Morsi. The authorities have not yet questioned or said they intend to question security forces about their use of firearms on that day. On October 6, at least 57 people were killed nationwide, but mostly in Cairo when security forces cracked down on supporters of Morsi who were trying to march toward the iconic Tahrir Square where backers of the military were celebrating the 40th anniversary of the Arab-Israeli War. HRW says that throughout the past 3 months, the authorities had not yet established a fact-finding committee or attempted to rein in security forces. Coming up next, the UN Security Council strongly condemns the kidnapping and slaying of 2 French radio journalists in Mali. Stay with us, we'll be right back. Welcome back. The United Nations Security Council strongly condemns the kidnapping and slaying of 2 French radio journalists in Mali's troubled northeast. The journalists, Ghislaine Dupont and Claude Verlon of Radio France Internationale, were found dead after being kidnapped by armed men in the northern city of Kidal. The 2 had traveled there on Saturday to interview a spokesman for the Tuareg separatist group, the National Movement for the Liberation of Azawad, and were abducted outside his home, according to their employer. The Security Council demanded that all parties to an armed conflict comply fully with the obligations applicable to them under international humanitarian law, including as related to the protection of civilians in armed conflict. They also called on Mali to swiftly investigate the case and bring the perpetrators to justice. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei voiced his support for Iran's talks with world powers over its disputed nuclear program while expressing pessimism about them. A new round of talks between Iranian negotiators and representatives from the so-called P5+1 group of world powers is scheduled in Geneva for November 7th and 8th. The second meeting since moderate President Hassan Rouhani took office in August. The talks are aimed at curbing Iran's sensitive nuclear work in exchange for a relief from international sanctions strangling Iran's economy. All decisions on the nuclear program, which the West suspect is masking a military drive despite repeated Iranian denials, rest with Khamenei. He also described arch-foe Israel as an illegitimate and bastard regime as he hit out at its alliance with the United States. Tunisia's Islamist rulers and opposition have until noontime Monday to agree on a new prime minister to steer the country out of a month-long political crisis. The Islamist party Ennahda and the opposition have failed in a week of negotiations to choose a new prime minister as part of a roadmap to overcome the crisis. They originally had until Saturday to bridge their differences, but that deadline passed without an agreement being reached. According to politicians, the negotiators could not decide between Mohammed Ennahda, supported by the opposition, and Ahmad Mistiri, backed by Ennahda and its allies. Both are well respected and served under the late Habib Bourguiba, who led the fight for Tunisia's independence from its French colonial masters and served as its first president for 3 decades from 1957. On to the United States, where a lone gunman stormed into a packed terminal at the Los Angeles International Airport and opened fire with an assault weapon, killing an unarmed federal security agent before he was shot and captured. The gunfire in Terminal 3 touched off panic and chaos at one of the world's busiest airports as hundreds of travelers ran frantically for safety or dove for cover behind racks of luggage and loud alarms blared. In addition to the Transportation Security Administration agent who was slain, at least one other was shot and wounded, and a number of other people were hurt in the pandemonium. Nearly 750 flights were halted, grounded, or diverted as police evacuated passengers and shut down 3 terminals. Streets around the airport were blocked off for hours, snarling traffic for miles. Special Agent David Baudick of the FBI identified the suspect as 23-year-old Paul Anthony Cancia, a resident of the LA area who was being treated for his injuries at a local hospital. U.S. scientists seeking to unravel the mysteries of HIV have made an important breakthrough after capturing the clearest image yet of a protein which allows the deadly virus to attack human immune cells. New research has showed that the scientists at the Scripps Research Institute and Cornell Medical College have managed to obtain a detailed view of the atomic structure of the protein which envelops HIV, the virus which causes AIDS. The development could potentially pave the way for a vaccine, according to the findings published in the U.S. journal Science. Although sophisticated antiviral drugs have been used to manage HIV infections in many developed countries, a vaccine against infection has already proved elusive. And on that note, we end our bulletin for today. These are Sunday headlines. The army arrests 3 Lebanese and 1 Syrian over their involvement in an attack on a bus carrying Alawite residents in Tripoli. Future MP Nuhad Mashnout reiterates that Hezbollah's withdrawal from Syria and the Ba'abda Declaration are the only basis of any future partnership between the party and the resistance. And U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry says his country is committed to working with Egypt's interim rulers on his first visit to Cairo since the military ousted President Mohamed Morsi. Those are your Sunday headlines live on Future Television in Beirut. I'm Yumna Naufal. Stay tuned for our very own Serge Berberi coming up next.
الرؤساء الثلاث يؤيدون فكرة المؤتمر
أن يعود حزب الله إلى لبنان